The short answer is that I felt as though I was not capable of making the kinds of changes that would justify my continued presence and my continued work.
Why not?
Because I think it's clear that the ideology of what we call wokeism and attendant anti-Semitism is deeply rooted in the culture of Harvard and other elite institutions. And in order to extirpate it, it's going to take an act of will that I'm not sure any of these schools is yet prepared to undertake.
Wokeism, anti-Semitism. I mean, what's the link, and how does it manifest itself in your in from
So
what
the
you've
link
seen?
the link in this sense is not a recognition of oppression, which I think is important. But once you begin to divide people along axes of oppression, black more oppressed than white, women more oppressed than men, LGBTQ more oppressed than straight, and all of social policy and outlook and research is then plotted along this table so that you can understand who the good guys are and the bad guys are, not only in certain historical circumstances, but in every conflict, in every situation, both foreign and domestic. You get inevitable distortions because people just don't fit groups that way. And Jews don't fit this model in any way because here you have a group that have been historically as oppressed as any group in history. And yet, at least in America and in other places too, are doing very well. And therefore, they have to be plotted on the oppressor side as opposed to the oppressed side. And that's why you got those bizarre, cognitive, distorted protests the moment Israel was attacked, and letters saying, obviously, Israel was responsible for this attack because the idea that Jews could suffer or be oppressed couldn't fit the matrix.
Of course, all this has blown up this week because of those exchanges in Congress. What was going through your mind when you heard those exchanges?
The congressional hearings certainly highlighted the inability of the leadership of these institutions to speak plainly about what everyone recognizes is going on there.
And why do you think that was?
Casting blame is always the easiest thing to do, so I'm tempted to say, get the lawyers. I really do think that a lot of this was the legal whispering of we are a big corporation, there are lawsuits waiting in the wings. Don't say anything that could be construed as in any way deeply meaningful. But I also believe that part of it is that the universities have gotten to themselves into a terrible pickle in the sense that they spoke out about racism and then realized that this was a slippery slope. That if you start to speak out about one issue, then when you have another issue that might be more contentious, you have to speak out about that too. And so they began to try to retreat into, well, free speech, we don't take positions. And that was so transparently hypocritical that they were stuck in a position, I think, from which there was no graceful exit.
I mean, it is, as you say, a pickle. I mean, it's a sort of Gordian knot, isn't it, of rhetoric? But the Congresswoman from New York, Elise Stefanik, what do you think she was referring to when she talked about calls for genocide? Was she referring to slogans at pro-Palestinian marches? Is that what she was getting at?
Yes, Claudine Gay had condemned the statement from the river to the sea. The actual slogan essentially means to make Israel Judenrein, without Jews. It should be one Muslim state, like all the other Muslim states in the Middle East. And that was the call, that and Intifada, globalize the Intifada. Well, Intifada is armed revolution. So when Jewish students hear from the river to the sea and globalize the Intifada, they hear that as an explicit threat. And so for the president to say that is an actionable offense, we would have to throw people out who did that in front of Congress would mean a disruption the scale of which we have not seen on college campuses. So I think they were trying to avoid falling into that.
Is this new? I mean, have things got much worse since October the 7th?
I'm tempted to say it's the return of the repressed. I believe that this was already there, as many public events, such as the George Floyd murder in America, as many public events tend to catalyze underlying social divisions. This did, as people in Europe know very well, anti-Semitism has never disappeared. Certainly Jews in Britain feel it. Jews in France feel it. So I think that while this was a catalyzing event, we were not starting, sadly, from ground zero.
No,
The ground
I
is
didn't
well
mean that
tilled.
is anti-Semitism new or has suddenly come
Yes,
back. I suppose I meant that this wrestling with the issues of freedom of expression and where the lines should be
right.
drawn. Has that really come to the fore? Do you think
I
since the
think it
beginning of
has
October?
very much. I think that people were struggling with it when the question was racism, but the general social trend was so overwhelming, and America had neglected to grapple seriously with certain parts of its history so seriously that people were able to override the objections of, you can't make everything about your political opinion. They did, and now are paying the price.
And just finally, I mean, how does an institution like Harvard get out of this? I mean, surely it needs people like you to be taking part in efforts, even if they're not wholly satisfactory, to try and sort this out.
Well, if I thought that these efforts were liable to bear fruit with my help, I would certainly continue. But my problem in particular was that I'm seen as a representative of the Jewish community. I'm not a Harvard insider. And so the Jewish community was constantly saying to me, we see you're on this panel. We see nothing is happening. Is that because you don't care you're doing nothing? As one person said to me very wisely, you should not take a job that has accountability but no authority. And I felt like I was accountable for Harvard's decisions, but I couldn't do anything to change them. So I have made it clear that I would be willing to continue to help, but an official position puts me in an impossible position. And so I wanted to make a statement that I didn't think that things were going the way they should. And this seemed to me the most effective way to do so.